Welcome to the Mindful Healers podcast with Dr. Jessie Mahoney
and Dr. Ni-Cheng Liang.
We are physicians and leaders who are also trained in coaching, yoga, mindfulness, and integrative medicine.
We are also mothers, spouses, sisters, daughters, aunts, and friends.
In this podcast, we share candid, heart-centered, loving, science-based, thoughtful, and often fun conversations about the challenges life throws at us.
With our collective experience of over 30 years in physician and personal wellness, we reflect and offer pearls of wisdom for navigating life's challenges with more ease.
From parenting, marriages, money scarcity, cancer survivorship, uncertainty, challenges in practicing medicine, we cover it all.
We invite you to refresh your perspective and empower yourself with mindset, mindfulness, and other well-being tools that actually work. A quick reminder that nothing in our podcast is medical advice.
Today's episode is another in our series of parenting with presence, but it is also about transitioning well.
Welcome to today's episode on navigating the early acute phase of empty nesting.
Every parent, hopefully, traverses into the space of having an empty nest at some point. We all want it to happen, and we don't want it to happen. And if it's happening, we worry. If it's not happening, we worry. Today's episode is intended to share about my first week as an empty nester and the experience of the early acute phase of this transitions. We hope to leave you with a few tools and strategies for this intense acute phase and allowing for very conflicting emotions and tools to help you be in the moment when you are really working through something that is a bit out of your control. So I thought I would start by reflecting on my experience literally a week ago today. And I would have told you all that I was quite well prepared for this and that I had been ready for a long time. In fact, I have been known to have said that over the last year. No, we're ready. He's ready. I'm ready. And I was really actually fine until, there was a bit the night before where I was like, wow, I can't believe we're really here. And I started to go back and quarterback my whole parenting journey. And I should have done this with this one in particular, and had a lot of sort of thoughts about had I done enough. And then I went to sleep. And the next morning I was, on to the task. And I think many of us as physicians are on to the task. We're getting there. We have to navigate move in, which at a big University of California is, it's an experience. You have to have, the right barcodes and get the right keys, and you can only park in a certain lot for 20 minutes. It's all very complicated. So I was in that sort of, crisis mode where you're just in it and you're not really feeling anything. And so you really are probably emotionally bypassing, or you're just too busy to notice. And what I did notice, however, is that when we were actually moving Liam into his room, he was extremely cranky and extremely anxious, which was not part of my plan and not what I would have expected from him at all. And just full disclosure, he was really annoyed with me. Not Mark, but me, because I was suggesting doing my mom thing. Maybe you want to put this here. Maybe you want to put this here. And I had a lot of opinions about it because I know as a mom that he is not the most organized. And if we didn't start out organized, who knows what was going to happen. But he really didn't want my help. He really wanted to do it himself. And I think that he was anxious in the beginning, and rightly so, of course. Like here he was all of a sudden, and he's moving into a room with two other people that he's going to have to share. And the reality of that, and like not having a bathroom, everything is very different, may have been like a bit of a smack in the face for him too. So he had his moment then. And then we went to lunch and it was lovely. And he clearly wanted to be left. He was ready. He was like, I've got things to do. My roommates are here. I want to go enjoy. And so we left actually much earlier. I was thinking this was a whole day project, and we left very early, like 1 o'clock. He was ready, 2 o'clock. And so we're driving home. And all of a sudden, I just was hit by like a tidal wave of emotion that I was totally not expecting. It was also not the emotion I was expecting. And this is what I think was so interesting. It very much felt like anxiety, which I was really surprised by. I would have said I would have been sad. It didn't feel like sad. And, maybe I don't know, but I would say it was really like chest pressure is how it felt. And I'm still kind of blown away by it, because what was I anxious about? It's not like I wasn't anxious about him. I was really more anxious about, well, what was I going to do now? I hadn't really thought that, I had been a parent for 28 years and now I wasn't, but I think it just felt like this big gaping hole, and I didn't really know what to make of it. And I will also say that my sweet husband was really excited. He was not sad. He was not anxious. And he's like, what, you don't want to hang out with me? And I'm like, this is not about you, but I don't feel good. And this is not okay. Right. And it's probably taken me, 5 or 6 days to kind of get back to mostly myself. Um, and so I think to also honor that you and their other parent might have a very different reaction to the situation. And that was kind of interesting, because I had some judgment there. Well, if he's fine, I should be fine. What's wrong with me? And again, this is just sort of the human experience. And so it really did feel like I had literally, when you get off the plane in a foreign country and you've never been there before, and like you can't read the language, and I was like, what's going on? It was that disorienting. And so I think there's just a bit of this self-compassion for the fact that like parenting is deep, deep work, and you may not realize how much of yourself you put into it. And it's not that I'm not his parent, by the way, because I have had many calls since then. So it's not like I'm never going to be a parent again. But that day-to-day experience of having people living in your house and in your space, and talking to them in the morning and talking to them at night, even if they're very self-sufficient and do things on their own. And with this child, actually, he is about to turn 19 this weekend. And so he had been quite independent as a senior in high school, because he was one of the older seniors. And even as a junior, he has traveled a lot on his own. And so having him gone for a night or a week or 2 weeks shouldn't be different, except it was completely different. Mm-hmm. So I think it's just really important to, one, allow whatever you feel. I did not want to feel anxiety, and I really resisted it. And it grew and grew until I stopped resisting it. But I think just recognizing that you might feel an emotion that you don't want to feel. I thought it was okay to be sad or okay to grieve, but being anxious was not okay. And so, again, I just like to be very vulnerable that who the heck knows why that was my reaction, but it was. If I think back and try to understand why, maybe it's because, I always wanted to be a parent. I was a parent pretty early on in my life in medical school, and I've been at this a long time. So I was like really comfortable in that lane, and this was different. And so I think it could have been that. I have no idea what it was. So accepting that, and as you would say, allowing it and not controlling it. Once I stopped fighting it, it was a lot better, but not that much better. And I still would find that it would come in waves. I'd be fine and enjoying something, then I'd be like, it's back. That thing is back. I don't like it. I don't want it to be there. So it's part of the process. And I think you mentioned in the other parenting episode the patience, and it takes time. And I think you hit the time and you just want to move on, and recognizing that there is a transition period. And honestly, I have no idea how long it lasts, because I'm only a week in. It's already very different, but it will be continuing on. And then if it's not what you expect. So I thought I would be excited. Oh, yeah.
So I'm going to pause and normalize everything that you just said. Of course, there was that pang of anxiety leaving your last born child in a new university setting in his new life, basically, as you know it. And of course, that continues to show up because you're a mom who loves your child. So I am going to meet that initial resistance that you had. I know you're working on allowing it and feeling it, but I'm going to reflect back to you. Of course, that came up for you because you're a loving mom.
Yeah, but my mind said it wasn't supposed to. Right. That was not the right emotion. So I think that's just so being onto yourself makes the anxiety when it pops up. Now I can laugh, just have loving amusement about the fact that that's the one I really don't like. So why is it here? And then I think not judging your response too. Like I thought I would be excited. I thought I have all this coaching and all this mindfulness, and I'll just be able to honor all the different seasons and look back and like appreciate all this great stuff. Nope, not ready to do that whatsoever. Didn't want little reminders of cute children or my children when they were little. Like that was just not what I needed. And so I think recognizing that you might need something very different than you expected. And so a couple of thoughts on just handling anxiety. And I would say there was probably grief mixed in, though I still haven't really gotten there, but letting it be. And then we often talk here about somatic work. And I think with something like anxiety, it is something you cannot control. And so you really do have to just get into your body and move with it and let it be. And so I'm usually a yoga person, but I have actually had to climb up mountains for the last week and like do things in a different way. And so just honoring what you need to keep that moving and to, you often hear about people who go on a 6-month journey of climbing, doing the Pacific Coast Trail. And I can see now why people do that when they're processing emotion. And so recognizing that it might also not be your usual path. And so yoga is okay, it helps a bit, but it's actually not vigorous enough for whatever's going on right now. And so I think understanding at different points in time, different things would be helpful. And I don't see it as buffering. It's actually the opposite of buffering because it's actually physically helping me move the emotion. And so sometimes we say, that you want to do this to avoid the emotion. But just being clear on, well, I'm not actually avoiding it, I'm feeling it. And that's my way of feeling it in a more comfortable, safe way of shifting it. And I mentioned the self-compassion, just the kind of softness and kindness that, of course, you're sad and of course it's stressful. And literally, of course, you wouldn't react the way you thought you would. So I also mentioned the quarterbacking, and I know that for any of you who, like me, are perfectionists and you want to do the best job you can as a parent. So of course, when all is said and done, you're going to look back and say, oh, I should have done more of this and I should have done less of that. And I wish that I had yada, yada. And just be onto yourself. And in my case, again, the path was a little bit different. I just had to opt out of that. I was not ready, and still I'm probably not ready to go back to all the amazing moments, which I know are there. I'm not in that space yet. So I'm sure I will be at some point. But I think sometimes well-meaning people also want to tell you about how this was so beautiful and remember that. And I'm like, not ready. So honoring where you are and what is working for you. And then a couple other tidbits are, I have discovered over the week that leaning into trust and belief, so trust and belief in myself, and trust and belief in him, and trust and belief in my marriage, and trust and belief in where I am now, that initially I wasn't trusting and believing that. I didn't really notice that I wasn't, but now I can see very clearly I was questioning, like, what if I'm lonely? What if it's hard? What if there's a problem? And when you are sort of overtaken by an emotion, which I think, for example, if someone dies, that happens, or if something really tragic happens and you're not prepared, that we struggle to use the tools we have. And so just compassion for that. And maybe over a few days or weeks, you'll start to say, oh, maybe if I trust myself, it'll work out okay.
So I want to reflect back to you and I'm saying this with loving amusement, the micromanaging of where things should go in Liam's room was you not trusting and believing initially. That was like
You're
the
absolutely
physical
right.
physical manifestation of that. And that's
Although,
why
you
he
say
was
it,
annoyed at you. Because
I'm
you're like,
right.
Mom, you're not trusting and believing in me that I know where to put my desk.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. No, it was the stuff in the desk because the furniture in those rooms can't move because there's not that big, right? Anyway, and as you say that, I'm like, no, I've known him for 19 years and that is not his strong point. But you're right that he has to not be able to find it and solve it himself. And honestly, he probably will know where it is if he put it there. So I was advised to stop, and I did. And we left on great terms, but it was funny. It was a very funny moment. And then, so I'm thinking also, instead of asking those bad questions, I have been starting to ask, like, oh, what if this is fun? What if it's better? What if I really like it? And, you never like anything in the beginning. The very first day, it feels uncomfortable. And so it's possible I'll love this. It's possible I'll love not having to make breakfast. I did have some trauma going to the grocery store for the first time because, an 18-year-old boy eats a ton of food. And my grocery bill was about 1/4 of what it usually is. And I still have tons of food. I'm not even going to be able to eat it all. Like I cut it by 3/4 and that wasn't enough. But I knew that was kind of a thing with him and he likes to cook and he likes to eat good food. And so it was another moment I had to be like, oh, this grocery store trip is going to be odd. I'm not going to know what to buy. And Sweet Mark actually was very funny. He's like, you get to buy what you want to eat now. I was like, what is that? So it's kind of interesting because I realized that for 28 years, you've been making food that your kids like to eat and trying to make it work for everybody. And so if you remember what you like to eat, that part was really fun. So a couple of other thoughts. Hands wide open is something that I really dived into. I often espouse an intention, but in this early acute phase, I'm not ready for an intention. So just hands wide open, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. When I'm ready for a more specific intention, it will come. And I think that if I were to pick one now, it would be pushing things too much, trying to micromanage and control them too much. And so staying away from the really there's a pull to like figure out how I'm going to do this, and just letting it be is clearly what needs to happen. And then I think the last bit is the stories you tell, and letting this be a time of growth or a time to evolve, and that this one phase is complete and you're ready to move on to the next, or maybe you're not quite ready, but you will be ready soon. And just perhaps even not telling stories in this short acute phase. Before we started recording this, I said, well, what I really want to talk about today is the acute phase. And a year from now, I'm sure I'll have lots more ideas of what worked and what didn't. But that in this acute phase, a lot of the things that we talk about, you're not quite ready for. And so it's really that being in the moment, being present, being mindful, and letting whatever be.
So thank you so much, Jessie, for being so vulnerable and open to sharing this. I think this is a timeless episode in that when I traverse this in about 3 to 4 years, and then again with Ara in more than 11 years, yeesh, it seems like a long time, I will still be referring back to this episode in the early acute phase of my empty nesting. And also for you empty nesters out there, you are not alone
Yeah.
in this, challenging and yet bittersweet and yet joyful and also grief filled, complex transition. You're not alone. And as always, we like to wrap up our episodes with some reflection questions. So, for those of you who are experiencing the early acute phase of the empty nest. We'll go through some of the circles of awareness that's taught in mindfulness-based stress reduction. So it's taking a pause and reflecting on what thoughts you're having. Are there thoughts that are catastrophizing and not necessarily helpful? Are there thoughts related to judgment, the quarterbacking that Jessie mentioned, the what ifs, worry about the future, and your adult child now navigating this potentially on their own? What emotions? So, naming your emotions. Jessie went through a myriad of emotions and shared with us a myriad of her emotions, really kind of in real time because she's still going through them. And then also noticing the body sensations, grounding into and honoring our body sensations as we're feeling these emotions. What is our body telling us? What information can we gather from our bodies? Like that maybe anxious, nervous energy, how can it be processed in a healthier way? Like with some more vigorous physical activity, like hiking, like Jessie mentioned. So going through that circle of awareness and checking in with yourself in that way might be helpful.
And I'm reminded as you went through that circle of awareness that this is a complicated, complex thing. And so it is that because you care and because you cared and because you love, and recognizing that that is all a good thing. And the one thing I will say is that I definitely don't wish I had anticipatory anxiety about this, which I didn't. I'm actually really happy that I thought it was going to be great and I was going to be excited because I really did enjoy the last bit rather than worrying about it and feeling it. And so, well, maybe I was hit by a tidal wave in the moment. Reflecting upon it, I would rather that and having not worried about it in advance.
Thank you again, Jessie, for your open sharing. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share with others. Please leave us stars and reviews to help others find us, such that we might spread the ripple effects of mindfulness for more and more people. Thanks so much for listening.
Thanks so much for joining us.
We encourage you to dive into the show notes for each episode for more learnings and resources.
We also invite you to take a listen to the many other Mindful Healers podcast episodes, and please share the podcast far and wide with colleagues, friends, and family.
If our message and approach resonate with you, we would love to work with you.
When you listen to a podcast, you consume information, but when you work with us, you can actually practice and change.
We offer coaching and mindfulness experiences, talks, workshops, retreats, and more. Connect with us at themindfulhealerspodcast.com.
The content of this podcast is not medical or life advice. We invite you to participate in the mindful moments we offer at the end of most of our podcasts, but please only do so safely.